Hello, all. All right, let's talk about chapter 4, becoming a better listener. So, most of the time in this class, people think, I'm just going to learn public speaking, I'm just going to learn how to talk. But a huge element of public speaking and of oral communication is listening. And that could be in a speech format, but it also could be in a conversation format or in a mediated one-way kind of channel format, like watching the news on TV, etc. So there are lots of different ways to listen. Primarily right now, I'm going to be talking about the speech format. However, I also have an excellent TED Talk for you closer to the informative speech that helps you see how to listen better in a conversation, which is also super duper helpful. So, today we're just going to be discussing how to become a better listener and how to understand the material and assess the material that the speaker is using as a listener because you weren't there while they were Googling, right? So, your text first starts off talking about listening when you're in the classroom and try not to take copious notes, try not to write down everything that you hear. In a live classroom, I actually have a no laptops rule that I stole from one of the most influential professors in my entire academic career to date, who said you don't actually take better notes on a laptop, you just take more notes. And I actually have articles that support that if you would like to see those. And it's true. You end up just typing everything you hear, and that uses a different part of your brain than if you're writing something down. So, trying to synthesize and summarize is how you learn. So, summarize what you hear, asking any questions, writing down any questions, in your peer evaluations, that's one of the sections that you have to complete is do you have any questions, comments, concerns? So making sure you're writing those down during official speeches, but also lectures. You don't have the opportunity to just, Kirsten, when we're in this kind of format. So questions for me as well is always good. And then not just kind of forgetting your notes until you have an assignment, trying to take time and say, okay, now that I'm working on the week 2 information that Kirsten has for us, how about I flip through my week 1 notes real quick? The worksheets are an excellent place to do that because they are kind of guided readings for you, and there are places in the margins that you can write other additional information and questions and that kind of thing, or I guess type if you're typing into them. Um, but it really is better if you write them. Thinking about the next level. So we understand kind of how to listen in a classroom setting. What's the difference between listening and hearing? It's primarily physiological, right? So listening is an active effort and an active skill that you have to learn how to do. Many humans have the ability to hear, some don't. That's going to be the difference, right? They can still listen, it's just going to be through a different channel. Someone who is hearing impaired may listen through reading lips or may listen through sign language and interpreter, that kind of thing, or through subtitles, closed captions, etc. They still have the ability to listen, just like sometimes you can hear someone if you have the ability to hear, but not actually listen to what they're saying. Many times we do that with our family members, our parents. Mom says, "Hey, can you go take out the trash?" I was doing something else. I'm sorry, wait, what? Ask them to repeat it, etc. Like I said previously, there's always going to be noise. There could be internal noise or external noise. Remember, I said it could be something like I just heard the garbage truck drive down Poplar behind me near my apartment. It also could be internal noise, thinking about all of the work I have to do on my dissertation later. Those things have to be pushed out of your mind so that you can be actively present and listening to the speaker. Uh, the textbook talks about how hearing problems can be remedied by medical or technical intervention. It seemed a little bit ableist, but we'll go on from there. So there are a couple different kinds of listening. You've got comprehensive listening, which is how you are distinguishing the words, the message, any nonverbal cues, which in theory you're still going to be able to pick up on video. There's critical listening, and this is the piece that I wish a lot more people would do, especially during times that are so sensitive and so raw right now. Being able to add an evaluative dimension to your listening and figure out, are the statements actually accurate? Is there some kind of credible evidence supporting what this person is saying, or is it just opinion and something that I shouldn't be, for example, sharing on Facebook? And then empathetic listening, that takes it an additional step further, and this is what I would hope for all of you to learn how to do effectively in this class, and try to recognize beyond the interpreting the message, beyond the evaluation of the effectiveness or of the credibility, but think about the human who's saying it and try to put yourself in their shoes and figure out why that's their perspective, and is there some common ground that you can find. Sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay, but more often than not you can find something that there is in common. Your textbook also has a listening problems checklist. Normally, I will put that up on the board too, and you'll do the checklist. Things like, I have strong emotional reactions towards certain words, which we'll talk about in a second. Or I find it hard to listen to uninteresting material. And a lot of this seems like, yeah, okay, no one wants to listen to uninteresting material. Think that's less for the listener to understand and more for the speaker to understand. If most of your listeners are saying, I don't want to listen to something that's uninteresting, that means you need to find a way to make it interesting for them. And in the audience analysis chapter, I want to say is chapter 5, we're going to go into more detail about how to start connecting that to your audience, your topic, because it's possible that your topic isn't necessarily inherently interesting to them, but you can find ways to connect that. And that's one of the points on your topic approval sheet too. So I talked a little bit about noise already, but there are some bad listening habits that a lot of us have as well, especially with all of this fun new media. People will get entertainment syndrome, where you expect for someone to be engaging at absolutely all times, but there are some subjects that are not inherently entertaining, and there are some people that haven't learned skills like that yet. I would hope that I am at least minimally entertaining most of the time. But it's also really important to consider your speech going on in the future. How long does it actually need to be? Is there information that you can cut out in order to hold people's attention? Most of the time, we can't focus for more than like 10, 20 minutes max before really veering off into that noise and other kind of distractions things. Additionally, multitasking or texting. I talked about how you probably, in a previous lecture, how you probably wouldn't want someone to be like texting or watching TV while they're listening to your speech. You want them to be actively listening so that they can give you really positive feedback, really solid, deep-rooted feedback, rather than just like, don't say so many times, cool, right? You want more than that. And usually if you're multitasking or doing things like texting in a classroom, one of my biggest pet peeves, if you wouldn't do it in a classroom, try not to do it while you're watching people's speeches, as far as bad listening habits. I mentioned emotional reactions previously. There can be triggering words in a speech that are either accidental or designed to give you a either positive or negative reaction. A lot of marketing is designed to actively give you a positive reaction about one problem, and if they're using different persuasive techniques, a negative reaction about another. product or service or good, etc. But this happens all the time in things like Facebook videos or a lot of these like YouTube channels, which is your reaction activity this week. Let's give you an example. So things like, it could be the same word for each person, or it could be different meanings for each person for the same word. So I could say soft, and you could think of your adorable childhood pet or a really comforting, fluffy, warm blanket. You could also think of soft as a synonym for weakness, or maybe you've had some physical insecurities or some eating disorders or something, and you think of soft as like a negative comment on your physique. It could be positive, it could also be negative. It's the same word, depends on the audience. So hopefully, you will avoid being intentionally triggering in your speeches, because that can distract from your actual message. And that is what happens a lot of the time in like these YouTube style videos that you see. People are getting you all riled up, and then you focus on that instead of what they're actually saying. We don't want to do that. And so it actually decreases your ethos as well, your personal credibility as a speaker, because you're using this like emotional trigger rather than a combination of ethos and logos. You're relying primarily on pathos. You can also have biases as an audience member. In the persuasive speaking chapter, I'll talk about the different types of audiences, but there can be audiences who are initially 100% closed off to either you as the speaker or your topic in general. So there are some techniques for addressing that I'll talk about in the persuasive speaking chapter, but as a listener, I want you to try to identify those biases. I didn't want to talk about, or I didn't want to listen to a speech about something sensitive, or I really don't like this person. I've heard of them, I know of them. I don't want to listen to anything they have to say. Or I'm really, really hungry and I'm not thinking about anything else. Or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Decide as a listener that you are going to look for something of value in every speech. It's super important. There has to be one thing, and I want you all to try to find it, which means sometimes, especially if you have this super cool technological thing in front of you, pausing. The videos that are for this week's reaction activity, even though I've been teaching this class for a while now and using the same or similar videos, every time I watch them, because I watch them usually with you all, or in this case, I'll watch them on my own in preparation to assess your reactions to the videos, I have to pause them multiple times and go, oh, am I paying attention? What are my biases? How can I address these? Because they are designed to frustrate you and to get that emotional rise out of you. So look for that one thing, that's something of value in every single speech. There is something. It's sometimes buried pretty deeply, but you can usually find it. The textbook also talks about how you support your claims. As a speaker, how are you supporting your claims is what we talk about in chapter 7. But as a listener, how can you figure out if the supporting material is representative, if it's accurate, if it's the most recent available, if we can trust it? How do you know? Typically, as a speaker, you can help your audience members know by including the ethos of that information in your citations. So as an audience member looking for things like, according to National Geographic, cats are tiny panthers, or whatever. Giraffes are really, really tall, whatever the citation is. Or according to a study done at the Harvard University Business Department, job findings or companies want to give jobs to people who have excellent communication skills, etc. As an audience member, you can also start looking for the different types of information, of supportive information. So the first is going to be facts. That's going to be something that is a verifiable unit of information. So something where I can cite a statistic. This percentage of human beings are above 6 foot, or this is what the weather was. The weather is really gross today, and now my trees are on the side blowing around. This is what the weather was on June 8th, etc. We can verify what the weather was on June 8th. We can verify how tall humans are right now. Second type, inferences. You are now going to take some information, but it's usually incomplete, and infer something about that. Take it one step further and say, well, we know this much, probably this. And then opinions. Opinions are adding judgments to facts or inferences. You, as a class, are going to primarily live in the facts and inferences area of credibility as a speaker. Opinions, you can pepper in a little bit in your persuasive speech, but you primarily want to stay away from them because they are not necessarily rooted in facts or inferences. They are often unsupported, right? So your textbook has an example. Lee was late for class today. That's a fact. We can know that Lee was supposed to be here at 1. He got in at 1:30. Lee was late. That's fact. Not a judgment. I'm not saying Lee is a terrible person because he was late, or Lee is awesome because he was late. We don't have any opinion on Lee being late. The inference would be Lee will probably be late for class again tomorrow. We have the information that Lee was late today. We maybe don't have information if he was late or not yesterday, or if she was late or not yesterday. But we're going to infer Lee is going to be late again tomorrow. And then the opinions piece is Lee is an irresponsible student, and that's adding a judgment. Maybe according to me, Lee is not an irresponsible student for coming in late, but according to another professor, Lee is an irresponsible student for coming in late. So you can see how opinions maybe are based off of facts sometimes, but they're not necessarily generalizable the same way that facts are, or verifiable the same way that facts are. Inferences are as close to any kind of judgment, which really isn't even a judgment, as I would like for you all to get in this class. So as a listener looking for facts, inferences, and opinions, if they don't have a citation, is it an opinion? Is that something where you can do a little bit more research while you're actually sitting in a classroom? That's maybe not going to happen. If you're doing it online, potentially could happen. But is that also your job? Not necessarily. It should be the speaker's job. However, sometimes the speakers don't have the best intentions. So it becomes your job as a listener to kind of suss out, what are the facts? What are the inferences? What are the opinions? How do I know? Okay, so I think that's the end of it. I think that the big takeaways from this is that listening is a huge part of the oral communication, the public speaking process. And it's super important for you to be active. And at the end of this course, I'm hoping that you are also going to be not only an active listener, but also an empathetic listener, where you can take that additional step past critical listening, where you're assessing the information, you know what the message is, from comprehensive listening, but you're also able to put yourself in the shoes of the speaker and try to understand things from their perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree with them, especially if it's not a persuasive speech. That's not the goal, but it helps for you to understand the message and understand where they're coming from, and it helps us to kind of remove any of those frustrations that you might feel and keep that open mind so that you're able to actually learn from this information. So let's do a quick screen share. All right, so let's talk about the chapter 4 discussion posts. So I'm on your week 2 module. Down here, I've got chapter 4 discussion post. I hope it takes it to your version and not my version. It looks like your version. Okay, cool. So for discussion posts, you are required to do 1 original post. That means I'm Kirsten. I'm writing my information about this. You are also required to respond to 1 other student. That means it's a really good idea to do your post now or close to the beginning of the week so that you have time later in the week to respond to someone else. If everyone waits until Friday, there's not going to be anyone to respond to. You're all going to be scrambling at 11 p.m. On that day. So first, step 1, find the chapter 4 worksheet in eCourseWare. It's going to be really helpful for you to take notes, and I'll show you that in a second. I'll show you why. Is it required? No. If you just want to take notes in this, okay, cool. But I think it will really help you. Normally, I will have the class vote, and the entire class would watch the same one so that we could have a discussion. 2 reasons I didn't do that this time. 1, we're not in person. It added an extra step of work for me that I didn't want to do. 2, I've been using these two topics for 5 years now, and sometimes, like 2016, I think, the Women's March and women's rights topics were really prominent in the news, and a lot of people were really raw about that topic. Right now, it's police brutality, understandably and justifiably so. So it's completely up to you. If you are like, I cannot engage with that, I need to protect my own mental health, totally fine. Do the Women's March videos. If you are already deep in it, I'm actively watching and reading documentaries and books and engaging in conversations with friends and family all the time. I feel okay engaging. Cool. Do police brutality. It's entirely up to you. I am not requiring you to do one or the other. You get to pick. You also don't have to respond to one or the other. If you want to, you can. If you do the women's rights, Women's March concept videos, and you want to respond to police brutality, cool. If you do police brutality and you want to respond to the women's rights videos, then totally fine with me too. So you want to watch both videos. They are going to come from 2 different perspectives because 1, I think it's important to try to practice. I have no way of knowing what side, what perspective, what your personal opinion is on either of these topics. So I would like to be fair. 2, I want to urge you to kind of get riled up by these videos. And if you are agreeing with the speaker, that's not necessarily going to give you that emotional reaction that you can then practice managing and actually listen to the message and try to work on your listening skills. So you're going to listen to both, watch both videos. So if you are doing Women's March, there's video 1, video 2. If you are doing police brutality / Black parenting, there's video 1 or video 2. You have to do both. After you do both, I'm going to scroll back up in a second because I have something else I want to say about that. But after you do both, I want you to answer these questions on both. If you want to copy this piece and put that, not the whole post, but just these video 1, video 2 questions into your discussion post, cool. If that helps give you structure, awesome. Make sure that you're responding to each question if you don't. So there should be at least 4 sentences for each post. 4, that's 8. Then you also have to reply to at least one other student. That response should be at least 4 sentences in length. So that's at least 12 sentences. That's not that bad. That's not that much, right? It's completely doable. If you want to write more, write more. Awesome, cool. The second reason that I'm not having y'all vote on either of these is that I cannot ethically require you to engage in a topic without being able to in person support you and mediate any kind of emotional, intellectual discomfort. If you feel any kind of discomfort afterward and you want to talk to me about that, let's do it. The whole goal of this activity is to make you feel something. You will be frustrated, and that is 100% okay. The goal of the activity is to note that frustration, figure out how you can address it, and try to engage with the message of the speaker and think about that. What is the one thing that I can take away from this? What is the one piece of information in here that is valuable? I also added an adorable animal friends video in here if you need a little bit of cute fluff after to decompress with this kind of heavy topics. So your questions are, 1, what's one concern you have before watching the video? You'll see in the titles, some of them are already kind of inflammatory. One of them uses the word, I think, con artist or duped. I forget which video I gave you guys. Or how can you address this concern? It is possible. Talked about it. What's the speaker's message? Did they use credible sources? That's that ethos. Logical arguments? That's that logos. Or was it primarily emotion or pathos? Or was it opinion? Think about those facts, inferences, opinions. How do you know? How do you know that it was an opinion? Some of the speakers use citations. How do you know that those citations were accurate, were credible? Can you go look at them? After, how do you feel? How did your perspectives change or your feelings change from before the video? Maybe the answer is they didn't. That's okay too. And then finally, was the speech effective? What could the speaker do to improve it? The answer could be they could use citations, or they could remove vulgar language. Some of them use vulgar language that maybe distracts or is intended to distract from the message and get you riled up that someone is calling an ad hominem attack using foul language about someone rather than understanding and assessing the message. And then the exact same questions for video too. So I'm gonna go show you now, and then you'll click start a new thread. That'll be your post. Then once there are threads, you can go respond to somebody else. Now I'm gonna show you the chapter 4, super helpful worksheet. Okay, so I have your reminders all here on the top. I know it says we're watching it in class, but obviously this is still in class, so whatever, it works. So make sure that you're focusing on the 3 A's. Am I paying attention? Or am I over here thinking about the people who are cleaning out the pool right outside my window? Or am I thinking about what I'm gonna have for lunch when I'm done recording these videos? Attitude. Do I have any kind of biases already? Do I have a bias? Does the title immediately put me off from this video? Adjust, or during the video, did they say something inflammatory? Do I need to check my attitude? And then adjustment. It could be multiple times throughout the video that you have to pause and say, what's my attitude? I really hate this. This is really frustrating. How do I adjust my attitude? How can I remove some of that frustration? How can I rationalize through it? Remember to keep an open mind, identify any distractions, things like these. Mine is upside down and turned on silent. Identify any distractions, come prepared, prepared to listen. Sometimes that's things like all of my liquids here, so I don't have to go get up in the middle of a speech because I get thirsty. Or maybe that's come prepared to take notes, which is the fourth one. So do I have a pen and paper ready? Watch out for anticipating. Sometimes people, when they are listening, think, oh, this is what the speaker is going to say. Not necessarily true. Why don't you let the speaker say that? Judging. Try not to automatically add those opinions in based on what the speaker is saying. Try to keep it at the fact or inference level, as well as thinking critically about them. Critically is not necessarily a judgment. You are assessing the effectiveness, assessing the credibility. And watch out for reacting emotionally. These videos will provoke a reaction. We want to pause if we're all in our emotions and we're emotionally reacting. Not that emotions are bad. Emotions can be very effective, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if you are reacting emotionally, you're not going to be listening to the message. And like I said previously, are they using primarily ethos and logos, or are they using all pathos? All three need to be present in your speech. That was one of your quiz questions for chapter 1. You can't have a speech without all three. If you have the first two, it can be super boring. A speech without pathos is not going to be as engaging, without passion, but a speech that is all pathos, all emotion, is not going to be credible. So you need a combination thereof. And pathos can be a really effective tool for getting people to listen and engage. So now that you consider all of that, you can go in and write the title of the video. Some of this will answer the questions in the discussion board. So what's your initial gut reaction to the video? How might these reactions hinder your ability to listen to the speaker? And how can you address any potential biases and maintain an open mind? On the next page, there is a place for you to write notes during. So what are the speaker's main points? That takes something from the speech. What difficulties are you encountering while you're listening to them? That's that attitude adjustment phase. Are there any structural issues? I mentioned previously ad hominem attacks. That's a fallacy. That's where people are attacking the person rather than the message. So Kirsten is stupid rather than I don't agree with what Kirsten is saying because she didn't use a citation, right? Did they use fact, inference, or opinion? And then how is effective listening related to public speaking as related to the speech? Then you can go back up and do after. How do you feel? Did your gut reactions change before the presentation? How so? And how could the speaker improve their performance in future presentations? And I have 2 pages of that, or you can just print the first one twice, I guess, for you. So that worksheet may be super helpful. I will also mention, I can stop sharing. I will also mention that because these topics are important but heavy, they're significant topics, I expect, especially because the speeches that you'll be watching are designed to be emotionally provocative. Any kind of disrespect in the discussions will result in a 0. There is a way to engage in polite and respectful and thoughtful and critical discussions without being unkind, without being actively disrespectful. So make sure that you are keeping that in mind while you are watching your videos and while you are taking your notes and while you are writing your discussion post, then while you are responding to someone else's discussion post. So that is chapter 4. Make sure, like I said, that you try to get the first piece done earlier in the week. Second piece done, you can do a little bit later after everybody starts to post. Kind of the same thing with chapter 7. You'll have your original post and your reaction to someone else's post. And I'm going to record that video right now after I upload this one. So let me know if you have any questions, and I will chat with y'all soon.